Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another video. The final Ahsoka trailer should be just around the corner, fingers crossed. You would assume Lucasfilm would want to start marketing the show considering it drops next month, on the 23rd of August. We're all excited for the premiere. Well, today, Natasha Liu Bordizzo has spoken with SFX magazine. She, of course, is our live-action Sabine Wren, and she spoke about what we can expect. And the biggest takeaway, which I've seen mentioned on various outlets, is she confirmed when the Ahsoka show takes place. Now we know there are going to be some flashbacks, and various rumours have stated that it's going to be split up into 2 time periods, especially when we're dealing with the search for Ezra, which takes place after Mando Season 2, but Natasha now confirmed the bulk of the Ahsoka show takes place during the events of the Mandalorian Season 3. So what are the implications of this? Well, for one thing, there's a very good chance we don't see Din or Grogu, as many of us theorised. Considering they appeared significantly in the Book of Boba Fett, some fans made the assumption they're also going to appear in Ahsoka, and they still might, but if the bulk of the show takes place during the shenanigans of Season 3, the restoration of Mandalore, then you would assume Din Djarin and Din Grogu would not be part of Ahsoka and Sabine's activities during this time, but with Mandalore restored, if some of the show takes place afterwards, then maybe Bo-Katan contacts Sabine and she goes back to the home world. But Natasha also mentions something very interesting indeed. She says the 2 shows are very much interwoven. There are a lot of connections and parallels. So while some characters might not appear in the show, some of those events might have an impact on what Sabine and Ahsoka are up to. We know Sabine is still on the Thal, but given Harrison Jewler's very much involved with the New Republic, maybe she gets word of what Carson Teva was up to, Gideon's return before he died, but really the biggest thing the New Republic is going to hear about is the looming threat of Grand Admiral Thrawn, but it's not going to be right away, because his plans are mainly happening in the shadows, to do with Morgan Elsbeth on Corvus, the network of spies, the Imperial Remnant, so as I say, there might be parallels and connections to do with story points. Ironically, there is a sense in which Natasha Liu Bordizzo's comment still leaves a lot of unanswered questions in regards to how the first season of the show is planned out, because Jon Favreau himself was even confused about the timeline of Mando, and a recent Timelines book complicated things even further. It said Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2 took place in the same year, so when Natasha says that the Ahsoka show takes place in the same year as Mando Season 3, does that really tell us anything? But it is going to tell us the reason that Sabine Wren, a Mandalorian warrior herself, did not get involved in reclaiming of Mandalore in Season 3. But as some fans noted, it's also very clear that some of the Ahsoka show takes place before the events of Mando, so it's not clear-cut. There might be some jumping back and forth, especially with connections to Star Wars Rebels. Some things might take place before the events of The Mandalorian, maybe how Ahsoka got to Corvus, something which Bo-Katan knew. So the making Star Wars rumours that there is a split in time periods makes a lot of sense, at least to my mind. But I think what she's saying is that the most important parts leading up to the end of the show take place during The Mandalorian Season 3, so as I say, there is overlap there, deliberate or otherwise. Even though there is a bit of confusion now, there won't be when the show releases. And when it comes to specific episodes of The Mandalorian, the penultimate episode of Season 3 demonstrated the Imperial Shadow Council, and the role they're going to play in the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn, making himself known to the galaxy. And who knows, there may be even the same scenes, viewed from a different perspective, like when Carson Teva goes to speak with the New Republic, maybe afterwards, Tuttle, the New Republic colonel played by Tim Meadows, may have gone to speak with Mon Mothma and consult with her, so there are plenty of ways there could be overlaps. Maybe the Wren family, if they're still alive, gets word that Mandalore is now reunited, and they all go there and we see an interaction between Bo and Sabine, just as we saw in Star Wars Rebels, and that's how Sabine finds out the Darksaber's been destroyed. But I will say for the better. Natasha Liu Bordizzo also addresses Dave Filoni's 2026 Mandalorian film, and we've made the assumption in the fandom that this movie is going to continue the storyline of the Ahsoka show and Mando Seasons 3 and 4, but Natasha Liu Bordizzo has no idea what it's going to entail and if she's going to feature in it or not. It's too early days, production on the film doesn't start for another year and a half, and besides, the scripts are probably not even done yet. This is her quote: "When I heard they were doing a movie at Star Wars Celebration in London, I was like, maybe one day I'll find out whether I'm a part of that. This is one of those times when I can so happily tell you I have no idea what's going on with that. I'm happy not to, because that way I don't have to lie to you." So she simply has no idea, and probably most people don't, apart from Dave and John. But Games Radar say that this film, presumably coming out in 2026, along with the Rey film, that's when we assume it's going to come out but it might be pushed back, is going to be the climactic movie event that rounds off this section of the Mandalorian universe. So I think it's safe to say we will see Sabine Wren, Ahsoka Tano, and our other heroes too, Boba Fett, Din, Grogu, Bo-Katan the Armorer. And so those were the big reveals. Now as we await Star Wars Ahsoka, I was just thinking about some of the things they might include in the show. And I went back to see some of the interviews from Star Wars Celebration back in April in London, and Natasha back then teased something I've not seen mentioned in too many places. We've heard her comments about combat, about the physicality of what it took to become Sabine Wren in live action, but one thing she mentioned was the sheer amount of fights we're gonna see. She said, quote, "There are lots and lots of fights." And so when we talk about the Ahsoka show being a sort of spiritual successor to Star Wars Rebels Season 5 is what Dave Filoni called it. A lot of the intensity of the animated show really came in the form of lightsaber duels, with the Inquisitors, Darth Vader versus Ahsoka. There were lots of them, and that is something Natasha is saying Dave Filoni wanted to continue in this series, and the fact it's going to be live action makes it so much better. I just wish Lucasfilm would start the marketing train. We're all awaiting the final trailer. Could it be this weekend? And so finally, my dear friends, let's talk again about Bryce Dallas Howard. In yesterday's video, I broke down her comments explaining why Mandalorian episodes are not as long as some fans wish they were, why they're so short, so to speak. But in the same conversation with Katie Sackhoff on the podcast Blah Blah Blah, she confirms she directed on Skeleton Crew. That's right, my dear friends, she is going to be a director this coming winter on Skeleton Crew with Jude Law, and she teased it wasn't just pew pew pew, it wasn't just action sequences, there is some really deep stuff regarding his character, and she loved working on that show. Now, Skeleton Crew in many ways is the odd show out. It's one of the series you don't hear many people talk about just yet. But I'm going to predict that just like with Andor, this is a show people are sleeping on, but it's going to blow us away. Or at least I hope so. I know there are some darker themes in the show, but it really is putting the fun back in Star Wars, something a bit less intense. We heard that with the 80s vibe, the Goonies feel, that kind of thing. I spoke about this in depth. But it's amazing to know that Bryce Dallas Howard worked on it. But with that said, my dear friends, that brings us to the end of today's Star Wars news update. What did you think? Did you have a good time? Did you enjoy it? If so, before you head out the door today, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up. Also, if you've not done so already, please be sure to hit that big red subscribe button down below, hit the bell for notifications, and if you want more videos that you can't find here on YouTube, then the link to my Patreon is down there in the description. But until the next one, guys, may the Force be with you, always.
I don't want to talk about too much of it because I know you probably can't.
I'm just happy that I can say that I
you actually directed.
And we really got to do some fun stuff together, which was gorgeous. You know, it wasn't just like pew, pew, pew. So